time to celebrate all the wonderful fathers out there. Not just for being shining examples of how great a dad can be, but also for being wonderful reflections of who God is. Like God, you've provided for us. You've shown us how much you care from the very beginning. With God, you've guided us, helping us navigate through every decision, big or small. You've been present. It sounds so simple, but it's so important. Just knowing you're there when we need you. You've been patient with us, helping us to grow and learn from all the mistakes we make. And like God, you forgive us, offering us grace so those mistakes can never define us. And most of all, you've loved us unconditionally as only someone filled with God's love could. So today, we thank you, dads, for all of this and so much more. Happy Father's Day.
God, we stand in awe of the great things you've done for us. God, this morning as we sing this song, I pray that you would just, if you haven't already, bring to mind the times in our life in these last year and this last 6 months where you have provided for us, where we can cry out with gratefulness. God, how great are you that you see us in the midst of our life. God, thank you that you saw fit to come down and experience life as one of us so that we can be with you forever. God, we'll always be eternally grateful for you. So God, help us to see and to appreciate the things that you do for us currently and that you have done for us. And God, help us to look forward with anticipation for the things you have for us in the future. God, we want to celebrate a particular title of you today. Our Father who's in heaven. God, thank you that you have modeled for us what it means to be a good father. In the midst of the brokenness of our world, sometimes that title cannot be the good thing that you intended it for it to be. So God, thank you that you have shown what it means to be a loving, kind, compassionate, correcting one who truly wants to give us good gifts. And God, thank you that you have put men in our lives who, though they are not perfect, have striven to do that for us. So God, I pray that for the fathers here, I pray that you would continue to strengthen them to be examples of your character, who are selfless, who give themselves up, who have the high calling to love as Christ loved the church. So God, help us to sacrifice with joy instead of with bitterness. God, we love you and we thank you so much. God, guide us as we explore your word today. God, meet us where we need to be, where your conviction, where your peace, wherever it needs to sit. God, I pray that your Spirit find those places in our hearts and minds. In your name, amen. Grab a seat, thank you. Well, today is a good day. It is Father's Day, and I am wearing my Father's Day socks. And they say that I'm the best father in the world, and that's true. By one of our old houses, there was a dog park we would go in, and the bench said that everybody's dog is their best dog, and everybody's right. So just because I think, just because my socks say that I'm the best dad, I'm sure that your dads would also be under that category. I just want to say thank you to Richard, even though he's not here, for preaching last week. He was at assembly all week and then came back and preached. So I'm very thankful for him to come and do that. I'm also thankful just to be in a church where there are people who are willing to give their time. And he preached on anxiety and laying up your treasures in heaven. And we're coming in the Sermon on the Mountain. Today we're coming towards a close of our time in the Sermon on the Mountain. Hopefully for you, it has been an illuminating time as it has been for me. It has been an opportunity for me to really take to heart the things that I have probably taken for granted for a long time. Like, a couple weeks ago when we were talking about the Lord's Prayer, I had mentioned about praying it 3 times a day. I don't know if you've been doing that, but for me it's been a very impactful practice. And I would encourage you, as we read through this, to make some practical steps to actually, help this sit and sink home, rather than just be like, oh, that's a cool thing I didn't know. And so, I would encourage you to do that. And hopefully it's been a life-giving thing as it has been for me. Today we're in chapter 7, and we're in one of the most taken out of context part of the Bible, in my opinion, my anecdotal opinion, because it's about judgment, and it's about judging others. And, if you talk to someone who's had a bad experience with Christians, they often say, oh, they're so judgy, right? And it's kind of a funny thing because humans, we love to judge as much as we want to demonize people for it. What are some of the most popular shows in North America? America's Got Talent, for example, right? Actually, I know someone who was on there. He was an elder at my last church. It was very funny because you could see him singing. But anyway, the premise of the whole show is that there's someone performing, there's judges, but then us as audience members get to text in and we get to cast our vote, right? We get to say, is this person good or bad? And those types of shows are all over the place because we love to judge. It's kind of fun, right? There's another show that's about judging that my kids like that is kind of fun. Have you heard of it? It's called Is It Cake? Have you heard of that show before? Okay, if you haven't, it's a pretty cool idea. People have taken baking to some extremes, and the premise of the show is can someone make a cake look like a real object and trick somebody? So they will bring on contestants. They'll have like a dartboard, and then they'll bring in the real dartboard, and then they'll have 3 judges come in and look at 3 dartboards and say which one isn't real. And, the whole show, someone has a knife and they're like, I'm going to cut this one? Nope, this one. And they try and cut it. It isn't, and that's the whole idea. But it asks the question, can someone actually see what's on the inside based solely on outward appearance? And it's an interesting question because you know what the show has to do to make the whole scheme work? The judges have to stand about 20 or 30 feet away. Because no matter how good it looks, you get up close and you can clearly see the texture's off, right? It doesn't really hold up under scrutiny. But from a distance, well, a shoe looks like a shoe until a knife goes through it and then it's just butter cake inside, right? Or buttercream cake, whatever. But it's an interesting thing, speaking about judging, is that though we all love to do it, it's easy. It can be easy to fool people when you have some distance, when you have you have to put up a facade, and that's why you see on the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is correcting and chastising those who prayed, fasted, and gave publicly, because they built up some distance from themselves, and they said, "This is who I am." But if you look really close, it doesn't quite line up. Right? And that's why Jesus says in chapter 7, verse 1, judge not that you be that. Wow, sometimes the ESV, the language gets me because I read in the NIV. So when I read something I really know in the NIV, and anyway, you probably have that experience. Judge not that you be not judged. All right, so if we don't want to, on a plain reading, all right, well, I guess we just don't judge people. because we don't want to be a hypocrite, right? We don't want to be like the people who prayed up front and showed off their fasting. We don't want to be fake Christians. We don't want to be judgy Christians. No one likes being, roped into that category. So it brings up a natural question. If we're not supposed to judge, because we don't want to be judged, well, we have to kind of grapple with a pretty vital and basic question. Well, what is judgment? And to grapple with this question, I thought I would bring us back to the beginning of the Bible in Genesis 1, because I want to show you that judgment itself is not a bad thing. And the idea of judging isn't a bad thing. Because in Genesis 1, when God is creating the world, he makes some judgments. Right? When he creates something after a day, what does he see that it is? He proclaims it good. He makes something, he says, yeah, that's a good thing. I like that thing. And then when he comes to creating humans, he gives it another category. He says that we are very good. Right? So there is another level of judgment. God says, well, yeah, this thing is good. But then also there are things that are even better. So when God created the world, when he designed the universe and everything in it, he set up a system that there are good things and that there are better things. Right? That's in Genesis 1. So judgment is not outside of God's nature. And in Genesis 2, we see this actually lived out as well, because what is man's responsibility? Or in Genesis 1, we're given a responsibility, which is to have dominion and rule over creation. If you want to rule or have dominion over something, you have to make a lot of judgment calls. Right? If you put plants in the shade with no sun, they often die unless it's a gross fungus, and then they're happy. Right? But you have to make judgment calls. And in the same way, man is given a responsibility to name the animals, to categorize, to classify, to create species and all these kind of ideas. And I, as a personal side note, I think it's kind of cool that God wants us to use our judgment alongside his creative pursuit, which I think is just a really uplifting thing for us. So that God says, you know what? I want you involved in my creation. I want you to go out and name and put your footprint here. So our judgment actually works really well with God's judgment when it's in line with it. Because God wants us to be rational, thoughtful people who go and explore the world. And then Genesis 3 comes around, right? And this is where the fall happens. And the serpent comes and gives this really, sneaky speech about knowing good and evil. And why would God not want you to know good and evil? The tree's right there. What's up with God? He doesn't want you to be, to know. And then in verse 6 of chapter 3, it says this: so the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was a delight to her eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise. That's 3 judgment calls, 3 before she ate the fruit. So sometimes when we read that story, we think that Adam and Eve didn't know what good and good from wrong, or good from bad. Well, she clearly was able to make some judgments. And that word good is the same word that is used in Genesis 1 when God declared something good. It was good for food, it was a delight, and the tree was to be desired. But her judgments were a little twisted, because the serpent's whole purpose was to say, you know what? Rather than making judgment calls, you can be the judge. You can be the one who says what is good and bad. God no longer has to say what is good and bad. You can put yourself in that position and you declare what is good and bad. You take his place. Right? There's a difference between making judgments and placing ourselves as judge. Right? And you'll see this in the Sermon on the Mount. Right? Because at the beginning of on the sermon, it said, blessed are those who are righteous. And Jesus even says, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees, you're not going to get into the kingdom. We are called to live a certain way, so we have to have some type of judgment. Right? So judgment itself is not the issue. And what Jesus is getting at here is what happened in the garden, where we place ourselves as the judge and we declare what is good and evil and we decide what is righteous and unrighteous. And that's why he says in verse 2, he gives the warning, "For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." Because I don't know about you, I'm not always a good judge. Right? Sometimes I make good decisions, but if I am the sole arbiter of what is right and wrong, I will be incredibly biased towards myself. I want the good things. Just hang out with children. You'll see this, right? My kids had a fight this morning about who gets to play on the Switch first. And they were like getting really, really upset because they want what is best for them all the time instead of thinking a little bit more rationally and being like, well, if I just wait 20 minutes, it's not a big deal. Right? But in our natural state, we just want what is best for us. So when we put ourselves as judge, we often will give ourselves a bias. But when other people do it, it becomes a great, great evil. Right? When my son puts himself first, it's great. But when my other son puts himself first, my first son thinks this is the worst thing that has ever happened to him. And we do the same thing. So how are we supposed to navigate this? Right? How are we supposed to walk this through? Because it's kind of tricky. Well, thankfully, Jesus gives us an example. In John 7, when Jesus is at the temple, and he had just healed a guy on the Sabbath. And everyone was, the religious leaders were upset because he had broken the law. He had broken the Sabbath law. This is Jesus' reply to them. This is Matthew 7, verse 21. Jesus answered them, "I did one work, and you all marvel at it. Moses gave you circumcision. I can't say that word. Moses gave you circumcision, and you circumcise a man on the Sabbath. If on the Sabbath a man receives circumcision, so that the law of Moses may not be broken, are you angry with me because on the Sabbath I made a man's whole body well? Do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment." See, what Jesus is calling out is their hypocrisy. They're willing to break Sabbath law to fulfill another part of the Sabbath. But they condemn Jesus for doing the same thing because, well, it didn't serve their purpose. Once again, they're willing to put themselves as the judge because it works for them. But when someone else does something that goes against their preference, it becomes evil. So that's the warning at the beginning, is that, okay, well, judging is necessary. It is not an evil thing. It becomes a bad and evil thing when we put ourselves as the judge because, well, we are unreliable judges because we're biased and we often make calls that are not good. Right? We're hypocrites. And that's what Jesus goes on to in the next couple verses in verse 3. "Why do you see the speck in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take that speck out of your eye,' when there's a log in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, then you will see clearly how to take the speck out of your brother's eye." This is a great line for people who are unfamiliar with the Bible, who are trying to get Christians for being judgy. They're like, well, you have your own sin to worry about. Why are you worrying about mine? And to a certain point, they're right. But at a certain point, they kind of fail to see what Jesus is getting at. Because what Jesus is trying to communicate here is that how we see people is affected by our own lenses. Right? Yeah, we can easily see when something is wrong in someone else's life, but that is always filtered by our own life experiences, and we're pretty blind to it. Right? I was thinking about this. I'm sure you know someone in your life, in their dating relationships, or maybe in their work relationships. I think about this as in dating. I have a friend who came to mind. They keep running from relationship to relationship, and the same issues happen to keep following them around. I don't know how that happened, right? You're like, oh, you think, you meet, my friend met this girl, it was going great. It didn't work out. Again and again. And you're like, maybe you should just sit down and look at the common denominator here, right? Like, you are the thing that is following you around and causing the issues. Right? Because self-realization is really slow. Right? To see the dirt on your own lens is difficult because you are used to it. Right? But in other people's life, it's really easy. And even the example that I just gave of dating shows how much easier it is to see other people's issues. Right? It kind of plays into that whole idea. And this has been one of the biggest pain points for people who struggle with Christianity or have had bad experiences, is because this is their interaction with a lot of Christians, is that they feel like we are hypocrites when we say, hey, there's something going on in your life. And just like that cake example at the beginning, you get up close to some of them and they're just as messed up. They're just as broken. But yet there seems to be an attitude of, I'm holier than you are. So the important thing here is that, and so what a lot of people have done in reaction to this is that they said, well, then we just shouldn't judge. As Christians, we just shouldn't judge anybody. You can just live your life, do what you want. It's not my place. Unfortunately, that's a bit of a misreading of this text, because at the very end, at verse 5, Jesus says, you hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see, and then people are like, that sounds great, but then the second part of the sentence comes in, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. So this is not a commandment to actually not judge, but it's saying, why don't you get yourself in order? And then when you do that, then your criticism will actually have some validity. You will be able to see clearly the problem in your brother's life that you can actually help him with. Right? So it's not a command to not criticize, but it's to criticize with self-awareness. Right? Remember, we don't have to have everything. We don't have to have everything in perfect order to do this either, right? That's another misreading of it. Some people think, well, we shouldn't do it. That's one extreme. The other extreme says, well, you're not perfect. I'm not perfect, so I can't do this at all. And that's just not, we're never going to be perfect. So let's just throw that out. It's illogical. It's not possible. But if our pursuit is self-awareness, if our pursuit is to say, okay, what things are going on in my life that I can take hold of to say, yeah, you know what, I am struggling with these things. If I can be honest in my walk with God and with myself, well, then I can help other people. So it's not about achieving a certain state of having no logs in your eyes. Right? And you will get there eventually, right? Some things in our life we actually will be able to clear out. But some things will always be around. So this isn't saying don't judge, but it's saying first and foremost, be self-aware, see what's going on in your own life before you make a criticism or a comment on someone else's. There's one writer says this about this passage. His name is John Chrysostom. He says, correct him, alluding to someone who has sinned, not as a foe or as an adversary exacting a penalty, but as a physician providing medicine. And that is ultimately the heart of what Jesus is trying to communicate, is that the goal of pointing out a speck in your brother's eye is not to be holier than the other person, but to say, hey, I know what it's like to have a log in my eye, and it's really unpleasant. Let me help you get that dirt out of your eye so that you don't have to experience the buildup. It's not a a condemning of the other person. Remember, we've talked a lot about contempt in the Sermon on the Mount. That is probably the biggest part of why people feel like Christians are hypocrites, is that they feel like Christians are condemning people because they're living sinful, evil lives. When really the attitude is, listen, I have logs in my eyes. I have specks. I can't see them all the time. But, sometimes one of the benefits of seeing other people's faults is that I can see how my friend's problem kept following him around and he couldn't. Right? But I need to be self-aware. I need to be gracious and love him and say, hey man, I noticed this is a common theme in your life. Maybe we can talk about why it keeps following you around. Right? Instead of saying, hey, well, you're a terrible person who has commitment issues. Right? You see the difference? I'm commenting on the same reality, but one is I'm better than you because you have commitment issues and you're bad at dating. The other one says, hey, I see that this is causing you a lot of pain. How can I help you correct it? It should be aimed at building life. My friend, when I was in university, is a great example of this. His name is Dylan. We played volleyball. We roofed together. We spent during that time of my life, I think I spent more time with him than my wife. It was really funny, and we got to know each other really well. And he was one of those guys. Remember a couple weeks ago I said, at Bible school, the guys who are really holy got all the girls. Right? He was one of those guys, except he didn't get all the girls. He was just really holy. I should tell him to listen to this so I can hear me insult him. But him and I had a really good relationship because he was just such a genuine, kind man, and he just did not want to participate in anything he believed was unrighteous. And his heart was so, we would make fun of him for being really pure. He was the guy who had a 15-minute coffee break, and at 15 minutes he would walk up the ladder on the roof, and we're like, Dylan, just sit down. We're having coffee, just relax. He's like, no, but our 15 minutes is over. And we'd be like, Dylan, just stop, man. You're making us look bad. Right? And a lot of people felt that he was judging them. And we kind of felt it too. We're like, Dylan, stop making us look bad. Right? Because he wanted to be righteous, because he wanted to do things correctly, people felt like he was judging them when he was completely doing the opposite. He loved us. He cared for us. And people would read judgment onto him. They would judge themselves because of the way he lived his life. And that is a reality sometimes when we live this righteous life, that people will say, well, you're a hypocrite. And you're like, well, no, actually, I don't see you that way. I'm sorry you feel that way, but that is not how I see you. Right? So there's that reality of this as well, is that it can be kind of tricky sometimes to live this way, because whether we actually are being condemning, which is something we need to not do, people will maybe feel that way. So we need to make sure that our heart posture towards people is aligned, so that when that happens, we can say, no, I don't feel that way about you at all. The next verse 6, it can be a little challenging in light of what I just said, because Jesus says, do not give dogs what is holy, and do not throw your pearls before pigs, lest they trample them underfoot and turn to attack you. Hey, I thought you just said we should we should love people and see them well, not call them dogs and pigs, right? And that's kind of, I don't like being called a pig, right? I mean, in our culture, being called a dog isn't awful, right? I mean, it's still not nice, right? But it's not quite the same insult or the same category that it used to be back in Jesus' time, right? But Jesus is asking us here, presents us with a bit of a kind of an odd thing, because everything else sounds really nice, and then you're like, well, I'm supposed to know what, the difference between pigs and dogs, and it also assumes that I should know what is holy, right? So there's a lot of judgment calls implied in this sentence. And so I thought of a way to contextualize what Jesus is talking about here, so that it wouldn't seem so offensive, although I think Jesus liked sometimes to get your attention by saying things that are like, whoa, okay, take it easy. Okay, if you were a boss and you had an employee showing up late all the time, if you were a good boss, what you would hopefully do is you would go about a way to correct the behavior. You'd maybe ask them, hey, I've noticed you've been late a couple times. What's going on? Are you having a hard time getting to work? What is your vehicle working okay? Is there anything that we can do to help accommodate you so we can get you here on time? Right? It'd be a nice thing for you to do as an employer. And then, give them some time to prove that they are correcting it. Right? You'd say, all right, you've been late a lot. This next, month, let's put some strategies into practice, some things to help you get here on time. And at the end of the month, we'll see where we are. At the end of the month, this employee is continuously late still. Nothing has changed. So what do? As an employee, you're like, all right, well, we tried. I'm sorry. I wanted to help you, but, you can't work here anymore. Right? And the reason why is not because you don't like the person, not because you don't value them, but they're not worth investing your time and resources in anymore. Because they've proven themselves as someone who doesn't care, who doesn't value, right? Who doesn't see the importance of what you're doing. So you say, all right, well, we can just go separate ways. Right? When I was in university, I worked at the keg for like a month and a half. Maybe it was like 3 months. My roommate worked there, and I was one of 4 Jordans on staff, and our hours were listed on a piece of paper, and there were 3 of the Jordans had the same 3 last initials of their name. So I constantly got my schedule wrong, like often. I would miss shifts, I wouldn't show up, and at the time I was playing volleyball, so I would get someone to cover my shift so I could go play volleyball for school. And I had missed enough shifts where the boss called me and said, hey, when you're here, you do great work, but you need to make a choice. You either show up here and you're committed to here, or you're not. And he understood my reasonings, and I said, you know what? Thank you. I'm not gonna work there anymore. He gave me that ultimatum, what I just described this employer. He did that for me. He said, hey, when you're here, you're great, but you need to make a decision if you're in or out. And I said, all right, cool, I'm out. Right? That was nice. That worked out well. Another time I was in Toronto. I was like 18 or 19. And I got a job doing flat roofing on apartment buildings. And it was awesome when I was out there, but the majority of the job was like 8 or 9 hours of the day bending sheet metal with a guy who barely spoke any English, and it was just all Portuguese. So I was just sitting there quietly getting blisters on my hand, bending metal, bored out of my mind. It was awful. So I called in. I didn't go to work that much. I would call in sick a lot. I don't think you could be that sick in 1 month. Right? But I got fired, obviously, and I was heartbroken that I got fired, which is kind of funny. Right? But I proved that I wasn't worth the investment. And so what I think Jesus is saying here is that when you are making your judgments about other people, don't be naive. John Stott says this: the context provides a healthy balance. If we are not to judge others, finding fault with them in a condemning or hypocritical way, we are not to ignore their faults either and pretend that everybody is the same. Both extremes are to be avoided. The saints are not judges, but saints are not simpletons either. And I really like that line, and it brings a lot of good balance to what is saying here. So what Jesus is trying to communicate is that sometimes we need to make judgment calls about people who ultimately will waste the grace and good things that we give them. So we shouldn't associate with them anymore. They've proven themselves to be untrustworthy. And that can be a hard thing. Like, living this way is really difficult. I don't know if you've noticed that in your life, Being a good judge of character, making the right decisions in life is incredibly difficult. Because sometimes you think, oh, this person is awesome, and then they turn out to be not so awesome. Or this is going to be a good investment, this is a good place for our life, and it all falls apart. Living this righteous way, the way that God intended for us, can be really difficult. I don't know, just look at how we're supposed to live. Right? We're supposed to turn the other cheek. We're supposed to not treat people with contempt when, that's all we want to do. That's why in the next section, Jesus says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find it. Knock and it will be open to you. We're supposed to ask for divine help in this life because it is incredibly difficult. And I like that a lot of commentators see this progression between ask, seek, and knock. It's like it's a what's it called? A crescendo of urgency. Right? I think of my kids at bedtime. When the slightest thing is wrong, they'll say my name, and then they'll yell it, and then they'll come out of their bed and come and find me. And if I'm away, they'll ask, like knocking, they'll ask like, hey, where's Dad? Or where's Mom? Right? And in the same way that if you want someone's attention, you'll ask them, you go find them, and then you might barge on their door because you're like, well, I know you're here. This verse has also been taken out of context a lot because some people have taken this verse as, well, this is a promise then. God's going to give me everything that I want. Without realizing that this is conditional. Right? Because if it was, if we just get everything we ask for, it would be more like, the genie from Aladdin. Right? We rub the lamp, we say, all right, make me a prince, give me a car, give me all the money that I want in my life. All of our material things would just be like, all right, cool. So I think to understand ask, seek, and knock, this idea of urgency, this idea of coming to God for what we need, I think we can frame it in two verses that will help us understand this well. The first one is from earlier in the Sermon on the Mount, when in the Lord's Prayer, when it says, your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. So in our prayer life, as we seek to live this righteous way, we're supposed to say, you know what? God, I don't want to live my way anymore because it doesn't lead well. I shouldn't be the judge. I'm not a good judge. So I'm going to seek your will, your way, the way that actually gives life and grace and mercy. And in John 15, verse 7, Jesus echoes this. He says, if you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. This is an important understanding of as we abide in Christ, as we get to know God, as we put his words in our heart and spend time with him, well, then our desires become more aligned with his desires. Right? Remember we were talking about good and bad in the garden earlier? Jesus, in verse 9, keep that in your mind, says, which one of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask him? Remember, this is not our definition of good. Right? Our definition of good comes from the Father who created all things and who declares things as good. I know I give a lot of kid examples today, but it's Father's Day, so deal with it. My kids want a lot of things, and I want to give them a lot of things. I was talking earlier about, there's some new Lego sets that are coming out for Star Wars, and I'm like, I would love to give my kids these things because I like them too. I think they're good. My kids think they're good, right? But my kids also want a lot of things that they think are good that are bad for them. My kids would eat candy all day if they could, right? We have Cinnamon Toast Crunch at home right now, and you know what they want all the time? They just want Cinnamon Toast Crunch because it's wonderful and amazing, right? but it is not a good thing for them. And it is my job as a father to say, actually, I know what is good for you, despite what you think is good for you. And I'm going to give you the thing that is good. Even if, like this morning, having an argument about wearing pants when it's cold outside. Right? It's silly, but in our life, how many examples do we need to have in our life where we want something when we think it's good, but we haven't done anything to say, God, is this actually good for me? Right? I wanted something for a long time, but if I had it, I knew it would be bad for me. So I can be thankful that God didn't give me that thing. There are a lot of examples of that you probably can think of. So when Jesus says, you have a good Father who wants to give you good things, it's not just whatever we want, but it's something that our Father who called us very good says, I know what is best for you, and I'm going to give the thing that actually leads you to life. Even though sometimes it can taste like bitter medicine. This whole section is wrapped up in verse 12 with Jesus quoting a version of the Golden Rule. So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do for them also. For this is the law and the prophets. So our experience of judging others needs to be based in this commandment. How we see other people and how we see ourselves and what's going on in our life needs to be of utmost importance when we go about trying to correct and fix the things around us. We need to have the proper lens. And we need to be okay with criticism. Like when I worked at the Apple store, I've probably told this story before, but I used to work and fix people's phones. Don't ask me about anything. My knowledge is like 15 years old. It's in the Apple term store, it's vintage, which is an awful thing, and I'm sorry for the people who grew up and think that's a stupid term. I agree. But I was making appointments, and this lady said, "You're a very kind man, but your breath is terrible." And I was like, "Oh my goodness!" So I went back, asked for some gum, and I told one of my coworkers what happened. She goes, "Oh, that was really rude." And I was like, "No, like that was great." Because she cared enough about me to be like, "Yeah, your breath smells really bad. You should fix that." Right? I would encourage us to see this section not as a way to condemn, but to actually bring life to people. And it starts with a humility. It starts with a view that we will assume the best about other people. Because when we are judged, I want to assume that whoever is giving me criticism is doing it for the best of me. And if I want people to do that for me, I need and ought to do that for other people. Right? And on a human level, that makes sense. But our Heavenly Father sees us the same way. And a lot of people don't think of God judging us as a positive thing. But it is because, like that old lady, he says, "Your breath smells bad and it should change." Right? I actually want you to experience good things in life. There should be no dirt in our eyes. So my application this morning is called How to Be Judgy Christians. Right? If we're going to hold that label, let's just wear it proudly. We are actually called to live righteously. And we're called to judge people. Because we're supposed to know what a speck is and what a log is. We're supposed to know pigs and dogs. And we're supposed to know, first and foremost, that stuff in our own life. And we're called to do this with grace and mercy, because if the golden rule is that we're supposed to love God and love other people the way that we love ourselves, it really sets the tone for how we go about doing this. How you go about as a Christian in judgment should be one that brings life to people, that genuinely cares and sees people. So the band can come up. And I just want us to sit with that. And maybe this morning we just need to ask for forgiveness where we have walked this out poorly and caused bitterness or brokenness and divisiveness. And it's just an opportunity for us to say, God, give me grace, give me mercy, because I want to be your representative. I want to make good judgments. Well, would you pray with me? God, thank you for this morning. Thank you that you have shown us a way to live, that you are our good Father who wants the best for us. So God, we just ask that you would show us how to see and love people the way you do. That you would show us how to call others into righteousness. But God, ultimately and foremost, God, I pray that you show us the things in our lives that are tripping us up, the logs in our life. God, I pray that you would open our eyes, and thank you that you have given us brothers and sisters who can help see maybe a little bit easier the things that are going on. So God, give us grace. God, give us mercy. Thank you that you have summed up the law in a really nice, memorable way, God. So we ask that we can love you with all of our heart, soul, and mind, and that we can treat other people the way that we want to be treated. So help us to walk that fine line of grace and truth. God, we are so thankful for what you've done for us and what you do for us. God, thank you for our fathers, and thank you that you have modeled what it means to love us. In your name, amen. If you need prayer, come up for prayer. If you're a father, we have our kids handing out cookies. So come grab some cookies. Oh, thank you, boys. I get 5 cookies. But go in peace.